Before I get into the main part of this video, I did want to patch this in and clarify a few things right up front. So firstly, if you can't have rye or you're not interested in rye, most of this video is actually how to do an accelerated lawn renovation. So I took this from existing green grass to bare dirt in 2 weeks, and most of that time was just waiting, no rented tools, real easy, real cheap. Most of this video after that is about how I throw seed and how I'm real intentional to try to get even germination and do a few specific things as washout insurance against rain. So if you can't have rye, not interested in ryegrass, couldn't care less about one cultivar versus the next, then there's a timestamp on screen that will still be relevant for you if you're KBG or fine fescue or tall fescue. Those that are interested in rye, I wanted to give a disclaimer that I am super impressed with this cultivar on paper. It performed awesome in NTEP, so 18 different locations against 100 and something different ryegrasses. This cultivar is a standout in my opinion. It's got 0% POA. It has awesome color, has almost top tier disease resistance. Like there's very few that are better than it for disease. It has good traffic tolerance. It has almost elite, like near top turf quality. It just has everything, super well rounded. It's like a 8 out of 9 or 9 out of 10 or whatever in pretty much every way. And that's unusual in a grass. I'm hyping this grass a lot for somebody that's never had it. So I wanted to just mention that that's all based on data analysis and not firsthand experience. The part of the video you're about to watch, it was one take, no notes, and I noticed I didn't even talk about watering at all. Probably the most important part of any lawn renovation is the watering. So real quick, you want to keep that dirt moist, not wet, but moist for at least a week or two. It kind of depends on your grass type, but 2 weeks is ideal to hit it 3 to 4 times a day with light waterings. And then after that, once you're confident all of it has germinated, or as much as is going to germinate has germinated, then what I do is I start watering just once a day. And that seems to be enough to keep it alive. So all I'm really trying to do is keep it alive. You don't want to water too much after it's already up. You don't need to be doing 3 to 4 times a day when it's already up. You can run into disease and such. All I'm trying to do when I'm watering after that point is just keep it alive. The cutoff for if you can have rye, here's my opinion about it. I was noticing on NTEP with winter kill, the cutoff seemed to be average monthly lows below about 18 degrees. So if you Google your city name and then you just type in the word climate, hit enter, it will give you average monthly highs and lows for most areas. So if your city doesn't have that, just Google a nearby city and do that, and hopefully you'll get lows and highs for each month. But basically, if any of those are below about 18 degrees is going to kind of be where that line is. Much lower than that, you're going to start seeing some winter kill. And rye will kind of shut down in winter. And heat, it does some heat. Like my last lawn was super happy, 100 degrees, it didn't seem to care. In fact, it would kind of darken up when the sun was really out. But it's not going to do Texas heat. It's not going to do certain areas in the transition zone. If you're at like 110, 115 degrees very many days out of the year, or even if you're at 105 for a lot of days, I see those days rarely in my area. I will do some heat, not that big of a deal, but it will not do cold. It will just straight up die at lower temperatures. This is 11 to 12 days after seeding, so it's coming in pretty nice. So half of this seed I threw 11 days ago, half of it I threw 12 days ago. And yeah, it's looking pretty good, especially from certain angles like this one. It looks a little more full than it actually is. But that's just kind of the nature of a new lawn. It's all thin blades of grass. But yeah, it's already pretty happy with it. So hopefully you enjoy this video, and a timestamp is on screen for those of you that cannot have rye. Thanks. Killed my existing lawn. Might surprise a lot of you, but I did have a good reason to do it. And basically I'm just upgrading my genetics. Very big upgrade. I'll go over that in a sec. I also want to just kind of share how I killed this so quickly without renting any equipment. This was green grass on September 6th. It is September 27th today, so it's been 3 weeks since it was, green, relatively happy grass. So why did I kill my lawn? I was getting more and more red thread issues each year. My cultivars in my last lawn were Pangea, 50% Pangea roughly, and about 50% Hatrick. And Hatrick doesn't have a great disease profile, but the real loser in mine was the Pangea actually, is rated really poorly for red thread resistance. So that was the disease I was getting, red thread, and then red thread can turn to pink patch. It can kind of, in the exact same spots. It's like red thread weakens it, and then pink patch decides to go have a party after half the time. So it was just annoying and unacceptable considering my nitrogen was right, my watering was right. For me to still get red thread, this is how I've decided to address it, is to upgrade my genetics. And what I would have seeded the first time is this right here. I couldn't get this. It was fresh off NTEP 2021. That NTEP trial might not have even been concluded yet when I seeded this lawn. I seeded this lawn last in late 2021, like really late 2021, to the point that it almost didn't even germinate. But 2021, this was seeded with Hatrick and Pangea. And what I wanted to plant was Mystique, and I could not get it, so I got what I could. I did Hatrick and Pangea, and eventually it gave me more and more problems. So here we are. This is 100% Mystique cultivar. And why Mystique? The disease profile on this stuff is awesome, and it also made my A-list for color. And where Fireball has, I didn't plant Fireball, but I'm just giving this as an example. Fireball at the end of 2021, the NTEP was 25% POA. Hatrick was 16.6%. It might have been 16.7% POA at the end of 2021 trial. SP0116 is another cultivar that made my A list for color, and that was 13.3% POA. What I planted here, Mystique, 0% POA. Furlong is another cultivar, one of the very rare ones that was 0% POA there. Furlong has even better disease resistance, almost as good for color. So I would have probably rather had Furlong, but you can't get Furlong single cultivar. That's just not how it's distributed. So anyway, I got Mystique single cultivar, and where did I get it? Where did I find it? I couldn't. I tried to source it last time. I tried to source it maybe 10 months ago. I tried to source it 2 months ago, a month ago, something like that. And I couldn't find it. I found one company that had a couple thousand pounds of it. They had a pallet of it, and they would not ship it to me. So now I'm a distributor for DLFs. You do want to get on the list for Mystique, just email me at lawncareminimalist@gmail.com, and I'll put you on my list. I do recommend you try to seed in fall if you can. You can also overseed in spring, but that's more just to reduce weed pressure. You want to keep your seeding in fall in most areas, because rather than just 1 or 2 months of establishment before summer stress, like heat stress, drought stress, when you seed in fall, you get 9 or 10 months of establishment, so a lot more roots. Your lawn will be more able to withstand stresses if you seed it in fall. If you seed in spring, if you water it enough to keep it alive, and it has disease issues. There's just no winning when you seed in spring. It can happen, but you're just not dealing yourself a good hand versus seeding in the fall. This has really nice quality. It actually had the highest earth quality of any grass I was considering, because I'm only going to consider a grass that has really nice color attributes. But the 0% POA, I was like, man, that would be sweet. So I'm going to be counting POA plants in this lawn. That's one reason I wanted to seed it monostand, even though it's not typically going to be advisable to seed a lawn monostand single cultivar, but I'm doing it, and I just want to really put that POA to the test, so I'm going to be counting POA plants. If I get time, I'll be overseeding this in my back lawn. My back lawn is like hairy and long right now. I haven't even had a chance to mow it. If I get a chance, I'll overseed this, and hopefully that also reduces POA in the back. But yeah, I was getting maybe 5 or 6 POA plants a week on the existing lawn. And with this, I do expect to get a lot less. So it's got better density, it's got better turf quality, but also that 0% implies that it actually poisons POA potentially. Fireball, 25%. The disease profile of Fireball is junk. The disease profile of Hatrick is pretty bad, and the disease profile of ASP0116, another really dark grass, especially in my area, the disease profile of that's not great either. So this has a awesome disease profile. It was like right around 8 out of 9 on all metrics. It really didn't have weakness against any disease. of the rye you could plant, this would probably be the best option. One reason people do plant rye is because it stripes so nice, because of that one side is shiny, the other side is not. And if you're not aware of this, when grass comes up, it's lime green. So this is not going to be the final color or anything. This is just the way any grass would look when it comes up. In my opinion, this is the best single cultivar anything you can get. Feel pretty good about planting this monostand, even though that would normally not be recommended, and it might even be stupid, but I'm gonna try it. I think I'm gonna like it. So how did I get this to bare dirt? There's a few different ways you can do bare dirt or even an overseed or whatever, but I'm gonna give you full renovation only here. So 3-3-3 burn down is 3 ounces of glyphosate per gallon, sprayed 3 times, 3 weeks apart. So 3-3-3 burn down 3 ounces, 3 times, 3 weeks apart. So that's about a 8 or 9 week process. So it's 6 weeks before you even get your third app down. So, you know, day 1, you've got 1 app down, 3 weeks later, you've got 2 apps down, 3 weeks later, you've got 3 apps down. So 6 weeks, you've got your last app down. Then you want to wait a couple weeks for it to die. Before you spray any glyphosate, make sure it is green and growing. You don't need to worry about the brand on the glyphosate. Any generic stuff is good. It's all the same thing. And you don't want to just buy Roundup, because chances are good that's glufocinate or glufocinate, I think that's right. And that is not nearly as good. You want glyphosate. What I did, I kind of did this on a whim. I was like, screw it. I'm done with this red thread. I'm going to kill it and start over. Rather than 3 apps, I didn't have time for, 8 weeks before before it was nice and thoroughly dead. And really, that 3-3-3 burn down isn't as necessary unless you have like a seed bank, if you have a lot of weed seeds in the dirt. And I probably didn't. I really didn't have all that many weeds in my lawn in general, so that is not as relevant to me. But if you don't have all that many weeds, then I would recommend just doing what I did. But if you do have a lot of weed seeds, try to plan ahead and give yourself about 8 to 9 weeks for it to die, and then another week or something to torch it and beat it up and torch it some more. Here's what I did. This is an accelerated renovation, so 3 weeks from green grass to this. So September 6th, September 27th today. And I seeded about a week ago, to give you a reference. So it was about 2 weeks to thoroughly kill the grass and take it down to dirt. It's dead. Dirt, just dirt everywhere. 3 ounces of glyphosate. The label, I think says to kill a lawn. I think it says 8 ounces. It also gives a label recommendation, says if you want 3% concentration, do 10 ounces per gallon. If you want a 4% concentration, do 13 ounces per gallon. So I went super aggressive. 10 ounces per 1,000 square feet of glyphosate. And the thing that really makes it potent, I mixed in dynamic surfactant in with it. So the dynamic surfactant just turns it into glyphosate on steroids. And that kills it quickly, basically. And because I didn't have much of a seed bank, I didn't need to worry all that much about seeds coming up as I'm watering this new lawn. But I'm also killing the seeds. So after glyphosate, I waited probably 9 or 10 days, and then it was kind of dry and it was kind of floppy and didn't have any structure. It was dead, looked dead, it felt dead. After about 10 days, just kind of letting it die. You do want it to be green, actively growing and watered when it's dying. Like, you don't want to spray glyphosate on a dormant lawn. It's not going to go well. It's just not going to do much. If it's nice and dead, I started by taking my mower and scalping to the lowest setting just to kind of debulk it, get most of the grass out of there. And after that, I've got a 500,000 B.T.U vapor torch, so like a weed torch. So 500,000 B.T.U blowtorch that hooks up to like a full-size propane tank, a 5-gallon or 20-pound, whatever it's called, propane tank. And so I torched it with that. So yeah, scalp it, dump those clippings, torch it, and then I took a metal blade style dethatcher, not the springs like the Scarifier, but an actual dethatch car. And I just kind of ripped up the ground with that. After that, I torched it again, ripped up the ground again, torched it again, ripped up the ground, and I probably torched a third time roughly. I think I torched it 3 or 4 times. All the roots and stuff, I would kind of rip them up to the surface and torch them, rip them up and torch them. So that got me dirt, like thorough dirt. And if there is any clover seeds or anything, chances are pretty good I torched them in one of those burnings. So I just burned the whole area. I think I spent roughly $60 on propane, and this was 2,400 square feet because I burned it something like 4 times. Lots of propane and not all that much glyphosate. I actually ended up using basically the same amount of glyphosate, but I just did it all in one application instead of 3. 3 is more typical. And if you have a seed bank, you're watering, trying to get the weeds to germinate and then kill them. Or if there's any existing grass, you're kind of poisoning it multiple times. There we go, we've got dirt. So after that, we're getting ready to throw seed. So to get it to that stage, you need a Flowzone Cyclone backpack sprayer, a DG11003 spray tip. That's a T-Jet DG11003 spray tip, and then glyphosate, and then dynamic surfactant. So the dynamic, you want to keep that away from desirables. It is super potent stuff. If you get it close to anything you like, you can say goodbye to that. Definitely be careful with that dynamic surfactant. Very potent. It's going to kill it. And then a 500,000 B.T.U blowtorch, multiple tanks of propane, and a dethatcher to rip it up and torch the roots and all that stuff. So thoroughly dead, thoroughly dirt, and then we're ready to throw seed. After that, I took a dethatcher and I pulled it backwards. So again, we've got metal blades, not the springs. So I'm cutting rows in the grass. Let me actually show you these rows. So essentially here I am slit seeding. So if you look carefully, especially if I get low, you might be able to see them. You can see little rows here. So there's little rows. They're harder to see from different angles, but this is the angle that shows them the best. So I cut deep rows, and I'll tell you why in a second, but deep rows, I throw a quarter of my seed, rake it in. And Groundskeeper 2 rake is what you need. If you just want a cheap dethatcher, you can get a Sunjoe. Just make sure it has metal blades, and you probably want it to also have the scarifier. So you want to buy something that has a scarifier and a dethatch. Hopefully something that doesn't break on you. And I did a seeding rate of 9 pounds per 1,000 square feet on rye. You can kind of Google seeding rates. For rye, it's usually 8 to 10 pounds, and I think I did just over 9 pounds here. I threw a quarter of my seed, so about 2 or 2.5 pounds of seed per 1,000 square feet. Then I raked it, and the rake I always recommend for seeding, anything related to seeding, is a Groundskeeper 2 rake. You can get that at Home Depot, is I think the cheapest place. On Amazon, it used to be cheap, but it's quite a bit more than Home Depot right now. A round wire and little springs, so it kind of scrape the ground. That just works really well for raking in seed. The results you're gonna get are just gonna be better than other rakes. Quarter the seed, thrown into grooves, rake it, cut more grooves the other direction, quarter of the seed, rake it, and then what I did here is I threw another quarter of the seed and rake it. So no more slit seeding, no more cutting those deep grooves. Now we're going a little more surfacey, then the last quarter of the seed, and then rake it the opposite direction. So we got fourth of the seed 4 different times to get all our seed down. We got deep grooves going both directions, and then on the surface we've got seed raked in both directions. And the reason I do that is the slit seeding is essentially washout insurance. You want to avoid downpour in the first place. Try to avoid soil temperatures that get down too low. Mostly you want to avoid downpour. Try to seed when, some light rain is going to hopefully happen. Like here, I haven't watered for 2 days because there's been a little bit of rain. I think I only had to water this maybe 8 to 10 times the whole time it was germinating. The lawn all year, I only had to water it 8 times. Besides the, seeding, the watering to germinations. I like to wait until it's thinking about raining, and that's when I want to throw my seed. And the germination might take a little longer. This took 3.5 days before I got sprouts, but the rain is helpful because it's just, I don't have to water. So seeding window, 45 days before average first frost is good. If you're in a mild area, you can get away with less than that. If you're on a slope, some further washout insurance, Kirkland plant-based dish soap. That is really the only thing I've tested that has increased percolation rate. I expected pretty much any detergent or wetting agent to increase percolation rate, but most of them actually decreased it, and some of them decreased it by a lot. You want to actually improve your percolation rate. Kirkland plant-based dish soap is one of the only products that is likely to do it. I didn't test baby shampoo. It's possible that would, but it might not. So if you're on a slope, I just play it safe. I'm confident that Kirkland plant-based dish soap will improve percolation rate, and that should reduce your washout. So products that I recommend with seed, obviously, so Mesotrione, so Tenacity is going to, any weed seeds that are out there that are viable, they're likely to come up because, there's bare dirt, there's nothing to block out the light, you're watering to get germination. If they're out there, they're probably going to sprout. So Tenacity it might be the only, I guess, quinclorac kind of. Tenacity is really the seed safe pre-emergent. So that's going to keep most of your seeds from coming up. You might get some. For the most part, that's going to offer a lot of protection. And what I do, I like to do all my Tenacity and most herbicides by weight. So I actually get a microgram scale, some 23 milliliter pipettes to kind of suck the herbicide out so I don't have to get any drips of herbicide anywhere that I don't want it. I do it by weight. And Tenacity, I just look at the MSDS, look at the physical properties, how much it weighs, so I can translate that. And Tenacity for perennial rye is 4.07 grams per 1,000 square feet. And if you haven't done a lot of spraying with the backpack sprayer, you might want to err on the side of less, like 3.5 grams. That's what it is for perennial ryegrass. And it's similar with most grass types. You'll get a little reduced germination out of fine fescue, and then some grass types you can do more than that. But that's what the rate is for perennial ryegrass. So Mesotrione to prevent weeds. And since we have bare dirt, grubs like crane flies and such, they love bare dirt. It's just easy access for them. So if you haven't got any Acelepryn or GrubEX, or Durentis is the other one, so anything with chlorantraniliprole as the active ingredient, that is hands down just a no-brainer for grub control. In my opinion, there's no reason to use bifin or any other grub control. The toxicity and the soil duration of chlorantraniliprole is awesome, and it's just lights out for grubs. It has duration against armyworm. Acelepryn, if you've applied it any time in the last 6 months, you're probably good. The soil half-life of Acelepryn or chlorantraniliprole, Durentis, GrubEX, any of those, is 530 days. So it lasts forever in the soil. It's extremely non-toxic. You want to keep it off of you. It's fairly bee safe. It's just an awesome product, but it's lights out for grubs. It does something to their exoskeleton, and it's very effective. So I would recommend doing that with the seeding, like crane flies. You'll run into those in the fall. If you're doing Acelepryn, it's 11.83 grams is a high rate, 5.92 grams per 1,000 square feet is low rate. And for Durentis, it's a lot less because that is a lot more concentrated product, but it's still chlorantraniliprole. If you have land, Durentis is about half the price of Acelepryn. And if you just prefer granular, GrubEX is a little more expensive than Acelepryn, and you will want to water it in so it doesn't dance off on you on a downpour, but GrubEX is a similar cost to Acelepryn, and it's, you can get Acelepryn in granular, but I would just recommend GrubEX if you like a granular. Get that at Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever. Anyway, what I use is Acelepryn because I'm only doing 2,400 square feet. If you're doing 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet, you might want to try to source Durentis. You can get it like Chemical Warehouse or Site One should sell it to you in most states. Tenacity, grub control, and for the grass, for establishment, don't worry about phosphorus. It's going to offer you almost nothing. So starter fertilizer, totally overrated. The nitrogen is a heavy hitter in grass establishment. In most lawns, you won't notice any difference if you do have starter fertilizer versus nitrogen alone. I like to do half a pound of nitrogen from urea, so 1.09 pounds of urea dissolved in water, and then you can spray that out of a flow zone cyclone. An appropriate tip for spraying fertilizer or Acelepryn or Durentis. So Acelepryn, Durentis are both liquids. A tip that's appropriate for any soil application, so that's grub control, that's Tenacity, that's fertilizer. A T-Jet TTI 11004 spray tip is what I'm going to use. So half a pound of nitrogen. You can also do 3.33 pounds of diesel exhaust fluid from Walmart, just Super Tech. That is 32.5% urea, 67.5% deionized water. So it's about double the price versus a bag of urea, but if you can't find a bag of urea in your area, the DEF is really good quality. It's just double the price and probably 30 times as much packaging if you care about that stuff. It is a good alternative if you're just looking to get some nitrogen on the lawn. Phosphorus and potassium in general, applying those is not going to improve your turf. It's going to actually hinder the quality of your lawn. So in general, potassium is going to increase disease, and your turf is just going to go downhill sometimes when you're applying phosphorus and potassium unnecessarily. And potassium is not really going to hurt the environment, even phosphorus is kind of overrated on any harm to the environment. It's pretty hard for phosphorus to go anywhere. The soil kind of has to actually go somewhere, and in most cases the soil is not going to go anywhere. So I wouldn't worry much about that, but I would pay attention to the best lawn you can possibly have is usually, in most cases, going to be a nitrogen-only lawn. And it's pretty easy, so real quick, phosphorus deficiency is purple. It'll display as purple or kind of a burgundy color. And the blades will be kind of full width. and you'll see this purplish reddish. But if it's all shriveled up, yeah, and it's red, that's probably like red thread or some disease. But if it's full width and it's displaying as purple or red, you'll probably never see this, but that's what phosphorus deficiency looks like. Potassium deficiency, look at the oldest blades, so the lowest blades of grass, and it's going to be kind of more of a yellow color, and especially on the margins of the plant. But the lowest blades, just look at all the plants, just you pull a few full plants and look for that yellow. If you don't have that, you don't need potassium, and potassium is most likely going to do more harm than good. There's a lot of studies on potassium, and usually it does more harm than good. But anyway, that is what to look for phosphorus and potassium deficiencies. You'll probably never see either one, and most likely your lawn will outperform more balanced fertilizer that has either of those elements, like a starter fertilizer or a high potassium fertilizer. Most likely you will do better with no potassium and no phosphorus, especially in summer. So nitrogen, I'm going to apply half a pound of nitrogen shortly after throwing the grass seed. I want some nitrogen there before it germinates ideally, because I don't want to walk on it at this point. It would be fine if I did, but yeah, I don't want to uproot any of these plants if I can help it. So I'm going to generally stay off of this for a couple weeks. But yeah, half a pound of nitrogen, and in about 3 weeks I will be applying another half pound of nitrogen, because I want it to establish quickly, thicken up, and be just looking good and mowed and all that as soon as possible. One thing I forgot to mention is peat moss. So after raking in the seed, that last thing of seed, I like to do my peat moss, so Landzie peat moss spreader, and you need about 5 cubic feet of peat moss per 1,000 square feet, but I'm gonna do my first pass. So if it's 24 inches, say this is 12 inches and this is 12 inches, I'm gonna do my first pass halfway on the concrete, and then my second pass is gonna be 50% overlap or 51% overlap, just slightly more than half, just to ensure that I get full overlap. And then I'm gonna do half or 50% overlapping passes, or 51% or 52% overlapping passes. And that way I get 2 full passes of peat moss, and that way it covers. If I did a full pass this way and a full pass this way, I would have some spots that would have 4 times 4 passes of peat moss, little squares that that could be a breeding ground for disease. If I do overlapping passes 50%, I'm going to get a double pass. At the very worst, I might get little areas of a triple pass, but I'm almost going to get a double pass with pretty much higher degree of accuracy. So that's how I do that. If I get to the end like a fence, I'll kind of do that with my peat moss spreader and kind of throw it, and it will kind of throw some peat moss up against the fence and just cover everywhere. And peat moss, what it does after you rake in the seed and all that, the birds shouldn't have access to most of the seed, but anything on the top, peat moss will cover most of that. And rather than, one bird becomes 2, becomes 10, becomes 20, I haven't seen any birds on this. I'm sure there have been a few here and there, but I haven't seen any yet. That just is annoying, when you have birds on the lawn. Now, one thing that will happen with bare dirt is the worms, when they come to the surface when it rains, raccoons especially, can do a lot of damage, and they'll be digging up the worms and trying to get to them. Raccoons, try to keep them away. Really, you can walk on this stuff once the seed has enough root that it doesn't just fall out when you're touching it. So I'll be mowing this in probably about a week. No big deal. It's a huge upgrade in genetics. This is Mystique perennial rye monostand. I expect it to go well, and if you do want some, just let me know. I'll try to keep you posted on if I see any disease, or if I see 0 POA plants, I'm going to tell you about that. If I see lots of POA, I'll have to do a video on that and say, this kind of let me down. But the fact that this had 0% POA when Fireball had 25% and Hatrick had 16.6% or 16.7%, and ASP0116 had 13.3%. I think we're going to most likely see very little POA. The turf quality is excellent on this, the color is awesome, and the disease profile is awesome. So this is going to be a big upgrade, but that's how I do a lawn renovation. Grub control is a good idea, Tenacity or Mesotrione is a good idea, and definitely get a little bit of nitrogen there to give it a kick in the pants to grow. So that's how I do it, and if you want any of the seed to get on the list, email me. Might do a pallet in spring, a pallet in fall, I'm not sure. Maybe a lot of people will want it in fall, but I think, it's lime green color now, that's normal for seed, but I expect the color to probably be just as good or better than my last lawn, because my last lawn was half Pangea and half Hatrick. Pangea wasn't as dark, the Hatrick obviously is nice and dark, but this is a similar color to the Hatrick without the Pangea tainting my color or reducing my overall color. So, yep, I'm a color snob. This stuff was on my A list. It's got the the POA thing going on, and the disease is the reason I did this. The POA is just a feature. So I think that'll be pretty cool, possibly. I'm hoping clover, if it'll keep clover away, that's the one that really gets me even more than POA. I can keep my POA in check, but clover, that's too time consuming. I was doing it with a pocket knife. I think if I get clover like I have been getting it recently, I'm gonna have to switch to spraying it. I think it's because I've got a neighbor that just does not, his whole lawn is clover. He's right beside me, so that is what I got going on. I'll try to keep you updated. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want. Rundown on shopping list. I'll put links down in the description, but Flowzone Cyclone, great value. Don't buy it on Amazon. So Flowzone Cyclone, UT Jet Tips, my two, to kill the lawn is a DG11003 to spray fertilizer and Tenacity and Acelepryn or Durentis, either one of those, is TTI 11004. And to throw the seed, solo chest mount spreader. I don't know if I said that or not, but it's way better than a wheeled spreader. A solo chest mount spreader, the width of the throwing the seed is totally independent of your walking speed, so you can do weird shapes. Like you can see how weird my lawn is, and the evenness is great. Like I don't think you'll beat that for how even the seed is thrown. But anyway, I did a solo chest mount spreader to throw my seed. The walking speed and how wide it is, you can go faster for throwing it wider. You can go slower for throwing it skinnier. You can walk fast and go like this. If you got kind of a skinny pass, you can walk slow and go real fast if you got a wider pass, and you can turn it left to right. You can even walk backwards with a chest mount spreader. So the control on chest mount versus a wheeled spreader is night and day. And also the solo costs about 80 bucks, where a quality wheeled spreader is, from what I've seen, like the Striker, or I think Lesko has one, but they're more like $150 to $200. The chest mount one disadvantage is it's a 20-pound capacity, but this whole lawn here is, I would say 21 or 22 pounds of seed, but the chest mount spreader has a 20-pound capacity, but it will probably only fit, I would guess, about 6 or 7 pounds of seed, something like that, because seed just doesn't weigh very much. It's quality built enough to survive pelletized lime. Like, it's really well made. I expect it to last me a very long time. It does awesome with seed. It does awesome with fertilizer. You can set the stop on the fly. I open and close it on the fly. But it's just an awesome spreader, and especially for seed, which is one of the only things I throw, I don't think you can beat it. I wouldn't use a drop spreader or anything like that. And one thing that's nice, there's no wheel marks on the ground, so it's really just limited to your footprints when you're seeding. I didn't have any wheels on the ground, with the exception of cutting the slits when I was throwing the seed. And then I had several rounds of raking after that. So I never had wheels on the ground throwing my fertilizer or GrubEX or anything like that. It was all backpack sprayer, just feet on the ground. Landzie compost spreader would be next on the shopping list. You're going to need a Groundskeeper 2 rake. Again, that is cheapest at Home Depot. Landzie spreader, I think that's an Amazon thing. I don't know where else to get that. And you can probably get any old compost spreader, but I think the Landzie is going to be better than most. The gridding on it is pretty nice. It's going to filter out most of the junk that's in peat moss. I would recommend fluffing up peat moss. Try to keep sticks and compost to a minimum, so take them out as you see them, but also the spreader will take most of them out. So I would avoid compost in your dirt. If you are doing brand new dirt, roll it first. If you're doing dirt that's already been there, I would try not to roll it. Did some leveling work over there and filled in a low spot or two, but overall I got it more level than it was, but it was already pretty level, even though I haven't done any leveling for it's been 3 years and no leveling at all. My 1 or 2 spots that were a little low but really not problematic, I fixed those while I was doing it. Consider rolling it. If you're throwing new dirt, that's just going to be too fluffy and stuff. Avoid compost. I would recommend a little bit of loam in the dirt, but try to avoid clay. So pure sand, I probably wouldn't recommend that, but it's fine. It just depends if you have irrigation or whatever. Loamy dirt, just cheap brown dirt is what I would probably recommend for dirt, at least in my area. And in my experience, that's going to work pretty well for you. Avoid clay, avoid pure sand. So avoid the extremes of soil, avoid compost in general in the soil. Please don't ask me questions about that. I don't have any time to answer that, but if you want to do things your way, do it your way. Peat moss on the top. You're going to need Acelepryn or Durentis or GrubEX for your grub control. You're going to need Tenacity, and then Urea or diesel exhaust fluid for your nitrogen. Possibly Kirkland plant-based dish soap if you're on a slope. Now it doesn't look like it, but there's roughly a 10% grade here and even by the fence it's probably closer to 15% grade. I intentionally avoided downpour here, so I didn't need the washout insurance to that extent, but Kirkland plant-based dish soap will accelerate percolation by quite a bit, probably just about double, as long as the soil's not saturated. It's just another layer of washout insurance. If you really feel like you need washout insurance, you can core aerate. You know, you wouldn't want to do that on bare new dirt because it's just not gonna have enough structure to survive, you know, cores without getting thrown everywhere. Core aerate especially if you're doing an overseeding, if you want that washout insurance. But if there's existing grass, you just don't need as much washout insurance. It's gonna do pretty well. Core aeration, you know, that gives the water somewhere to go. So that's another layer of washout insurance. And if you really need to on an extreme slope, you've got things like seeding blankets and stuff. But I did this on the cheap. I did not rent a sod cutter. I just bought some propane. I used the dethatch I already had. I sprayed 10 ounces of glyphosate per 1,000 square feet and dynamic surfactant. All that stuff is cheap. So I've got probably $100 in propane and glyphosate and Tenacity and Acelepryn all together. I probably have $100 on this, on renovation plus seed. So I didn't buy any dirt. I did all my leveling with existing dirt that was already here. I just kind of throw it around and then rake it around. So I did have a leveling rake. I used that. And then I mostly used my Groundskeeper 2 rake for doing final leveling and raking in seed. I try to avoid the leveling rake once you start throwing seed, so try to do your leveling before that point. Roll it if it's totally loose, get some water on it. If it's not raking well, you don't want it to be bone dry when you're raking it. You do want it to get some water on it and let that water get down into the profile. You don't want a skin of water because when you rake that, it'll kind of peel right off. So get water on it, let that water soak in before you start raking, but you don't want it to be drenched, but you want it to be damp is a good thing when you're raking. It's not bad if it's all dry, but you just might sacrifice some control. But what you don't want is kind of wet and kind of not. If you do rake, you want it to be damp into the profile so there's no skin there on the top. Same with when you're throwing peat moss or rolling peat moss, that peat moss can stick to the roller, or that peat moss can stick to your feet. It can pull up sand if the skin of the sand is wet but not into the profile. So if you do apply any water for raking purposes or peat moss and all that stuff, just make sure it is into the profile before you're walking on it. Otherwise it will peel up, stick to your shoes and stuff. That's how I did a lawn renovation. The way I kill it quick is that 10 ounces with dynamic and a lot of blowtorch. So that was a trick to getting these results this quickly. So from green grass to this in 3 weeks. And yeah, this is a huge upgrade in genetics. Anyway, there's a bunch of products I would recommend, some equipment I'd recommend. So Solo, Chest Mount, Cyclone are kind of the bigger things. Landzie peat moss spreader is a investment. You know, that's probably $100 or something, I don't know. But yeah, you should be able to get a flow zone. I wouldn't get the Typhoon, I'd get the Cyclone. I think it's better and it's cheaper. That seed, you know, spend time on seed. I spent 15 hours on NTEP in 2021. I spent another 15 hours on NTEP in 2024. So, you know, this seed here has 30 hours on NTEP, just a total deep dive. And it was specific to my area, but I think the seed, given its disease profile, is probably going to be awesome just about everywhere. And it's kind of middle of the road drought resistance and such. So it will do pretty well everywhere. Ryegrass is not what it used to be. Still not a grass you can throw it and neglect it, and 20 years later it still looks good. You have to feed it, and you can expect to need to overseed and things like that. It's not going to look good forever. It's not an easy grass, it's a pretty grass. So KBG and rye, pretty. Fine fescue, tall fescue, easy. So if you want easy, plant something in the fescue family. If you want pretty, you want dark, go towards rye. The biggest downside to rye, in my opinion, in certain areas you just don't want to do it. The main thing with rye is the seed heads. I do a scalp once a year, about a month after seed heads hit. I'm scalping it. So I've got a video, just a seed head reset. It's pretty simple. Basically just scalp it and throw some nitrogen, and then the seed heads are gone. That's the worst thing about rye. The seed heads are really something else. You just don't have that with other grasses. Sure, they're seed heads, but with rye, they stick around. It can give a straw look for months if you just keep cutting normal. So that's why I think it makes sense to scalp rye as low as you can. Not as low as you can, but try not to cut off below the crown, and then just throw some nitrogen and let it regenerate basically. So you're going to get nice fresh green grass with the seed heads cut all the way off. And if there's a little bit left, they will get buried in the canopy. All right, thanks for watching, guys. There's an update. If you want any of that seed, go ahead and email me. And I think I'll put links that I'll get commissioned down in the description. I'm not selling you anything I don't believe in. I'm not going to put any urea down there. Go buy that locally. If your area makes sense for rye, in my opinion, yeah, this is the best rye available anywhere. This is only one cultivar. You would probably want to do a mix in most areas. I'm crazy enough to do monostand single cultivar, but you probably shouldn't. But if you want to overseed, or if you want this mixed in with other cultivars, other grass families, whatever, it is, in my opinion, probably the best rye cultivar that exists. So anyway, there we go, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want. You're not going to get many videos from me. That's how I do a lawn renovation. Try to plan your seeding window appropriately. So 45 days before average first frost for germination, not throwing. So, you know, more like 50 or 60 days before average first frost is when you want to get the seed on the ground. This is looking great. Like, look at that. Thanks for watching, guys. I will try to let you know about the POA, which I expect to be good. And I'll try to let you know if I see any disease, but don't expect me to turn the camera on much. All right, thanks.